Hello, my MGTOW brothers, back again. This time, I want to bring to your attention something I heard listening to a leftist economist, Dr. Richard Wolff. He was talking about white male suicide, and he was talking about that article done by two Princeton economists. The woman he's interviewing is a leftist feminist family psychologist, very well taught and with her own practice. Now, I'm going to warn you why she is feminist and some feminist leanings come out. A lot of her points are very well said, and it speaks to what's going on in America today as far as men in general, not just white men, and how the feminist agenda and the Industrial Revolution and the decapitalization, so to speak, the industrialization of the United States has hit men and how it has an effect on their psyche and the family. So it specifically speaks to not only men in general, but men as far as the MGTOW community is concerned. So I'm going to play this in its entirety, with the 15-minute limit. It's going to take about 3 parts. The first 2 parts, I'm going to play the interview, and then I'm going to save my comments for the end. So if you just want to hear my comments, you can skip to the 3rd part or wait for the 3rd part. If you want to hear the interview, which I think is well worth the listen, it's going to be in the first 2 parts. So I'm going to shut up and I'm going to get into this.
I'm very proud to have with me again, and partly, by the way, because so many of you have written in asking me to bring back Dr. Harriet Fraad, who is a mental health counselor and a hypnotherapist with a private practice in New York City. And she also writes prolifically in a variety of places on politics, economics, and how they intersect and interact with personal life. And that's indeed why I wanted to join with us today, because as she will explain, there's been some recent research that has really touched precisely on the interaction between economics and personal life, and so this is a perfect opportunity to explore that. So thank you very much, Dr. Fraad, for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So tell us, if you will, in a few words, what is this new research, who performed it, and what basically does it tell us?
Well, it's a very recent study by Case and Deaton talking about a phenomenon which they are not the only people they're not the only people who reported it. It's the phenomenon of middle-aged white men, particularly those who are not college educated, having much higher levels of mortality, dying sooner, being addicted, and dying often of things like alcoholism, cirrhosis of the liver, of drug overdoses, of opioid overdoses, and depression, because depression certainly spurs a wish to die. Suicide has gone crazy. For example, it's 5.5 times higher than it used to be for middle-aged white men without college degrees. So that there is a phenomenon of people who used to be at the height of their careers feeling hopeful about life and having high health expectancies to be zooming downward at a rapid clip.
Okay, just for the audience, Deaton is the same economist who won the Nobel Prize this year, 2015. So he's very well recognized. I believe both Case and Deaton are at Princeton University in New Jersey, a very prestigious institution in the United States. So we have as qualified a set of researchers as one could hope for, telling us and basically alarming us that a major part of our population, middle-aged white men, are in terrible personal shape. So that's the research. Let me ask you, as a practitioner, someone who has a private practice, have you seen in the clients that you see, in the patients you have, evidence that supports or questions or qualifies what Deaton and Case have found?
Well, what I see is just what Case and Deaton have found. What I see is that men who used to think that they were going somewhere and now can't are in terrible shape. In the first place, they can't, people who looked forward to continuing the hardware store they used to have, or the drugstore they used to have, or the luncheonette they used to own, are now replaced by places like Home Depot, by Walmart, by McDonald's. They don't have the future of a small business. They also don't have the future of well-paying blue-collar jobs. This crisis is across all groups, but it's most dramatic among white men without high school or high school and lower educational qualifications, who used to be able to get jobs in things like construction, heavy machinery, high-power sales. Those jobs have been robotized, computerized, or outsourced to other countries. And they're middle-aged now. People don't want to hire them because they're going to get sicker faster, and so that they are the last to be hired. And at the same time, one of the things that has happened is the economy has shifted so that the biggest sectors for jobs are things like food service and the lower level medical trades, which were traditional pink-collar jobs. And in addition to that, social service work, which has become the dominant employment, was associated with traditional women's jobs. Women have replaced men as the managers of almost everything because women's skills in conciliation and coordination and in defusing a situation rather than a kind of testosterone pushing are the ones that are needed. And so men have been demoted, and that has converted itself in personal life to the higher rate of divorce now among middle-aged people. And for the first time in our history, 69 point something, almost 70% of divorces are initiated by women. Because what happened is these men who grew up in a traditional way, that they would be the providers and that their wives would take care of house, home, children, and their personal needs, whether sexual or emotional, don't have that. They still have the mentality that women should serve them, but women are more frequently employed than they are. 40% of households have a primary wage earner who's a woman. And so they're not willing to come home and serve men, and certainly can't full-time the way these men are used to, and so that they're demoted at home as well as at the workplace, and they face a level of precarity and fear and instability in their marriages, which they usually could count on previously could count on, and in their jobs. I have a client who used to have a little store, and that store was outmoded by Walmart, and therefore he went out of business. What happened is his wife became the more dominant person in the household because she was still working, and so his authority was reduced. The children looked at her rather than him. If he told them to do something, they looked at her to make sure she agreed. She started treating him as if he were a nobody, and he was feeling suicidal. That's why the suicide rate is 5.5 times greater than it used to be for middle-aged blue-collar workers or people without a college degree. And
white people. Right?
White people. And then she decided, look, you're really not much of a man. I'm leaving. And you're not a provider. And you're making demands that are inappropriate. He wanted more sex to assert himself that he was a man. And she thought, wait a minute, I come home tired. I'm providing for the family. He wanted her to make more meals, to take care of him so he'd feel like more of a man. She thought, oh, no, you don't. You're home all day. And, the average unemployed man does less housework than his fully employed wife. So she thought, I don't need this. And therefore rejected him. And he came to me with severe depression and feelings of uselessness and a preoccupation with suicide. he's not the only one. I have another client who was a construction manager, and his job has been outsourced because people get prefab construction or hire lower cost immigrants. And his position at home is similarly demoted. And what his idea was, and his hope for, was that he would be constantly making more money, having the pride of being a provider for his family, and having a wife who took care of his personal needs at home. That isn't happening. Not only that, I have another client who did find a job, but like most middle-aged, non-educated white men, as well as educated white men, the recession has meant the job he found is way beneath the one he used to have. So he can't make the share of household income he used to have. And his wife is furious that he has these expectations, and she's exhausted. She went to school to have a higher paid job. The problem that a lot of blue-collar men felt it was kind of unmanly to go to school, to keep going to school as an adult, and so they don't. The majority of higher educational students are women.
Right.
And blue-collar men can't make a living. And so that, their interests diverge. His wife, who makes quite a bit of money as a pharmacist, a trade that is being taken over by women, now that there are shifts in these big pharmacies because women can take care of children and still be a pharmacist, she put herself through school, and her interests have diverged. He likes to hang out with his buddies, drink beer, go to the bar. He likes to watch TV for programs that she finds violent and stupid, and she's getting ready to check out. So women won't put up with what they used to, and they're tired. There's no reason why they should. And so these men have been dispossessed both personally and economically, and a lot of their sense of self-worth was tied up with their net worth, and they feel worthless.
Well, it's striking to me, listening to you, that in a rational economic system that was putting a sizable part of its population, after all, middle-aged white men is not a tiny part of our population, it's a major part of this culture. If you find that a part of your society is being particularly victimized by the way an economic system is working. In this case, you've pointed to outsourcing of jobs, of automation, and a variety of things. Then a rational society would set up the programs and the institutions to address this part of the population's new and painful needs, to try to find solutions, whether that be in an educational program or a jobs program or a training program, 100 ways of addressing this. And my sense is that there isn't anything. That, in other words, this is just you're on your own, and you either decline into a depressed person and who
kill
made
yourself.
You kill yourself, you become homeless, you lose your family, you lose your connections. If you're lucky, perhaps you find a psychotherapist of one kind or another, a counselor, hypnotherapist, whatever, that may help you at least identify that it's not your personal problem. This is the United States, and we tend to make personal even the things that are or should be understood as social problems. Does your practice give you a sense of whether people, when they come to you, do they understand the broader social economic changes that are bringing about their problems, or do they see it as a personal failure?
They see it as a personal failure, and they sink into personal dimensions of depression.